Another environmental tragedy after 80,000 tons of coal ash leaked into a pond, then into the Dan River.
The accident was reported in North Carolina on February 2nd, specifically in the Dan River in the city of Eden.
Coal ash is the byproduct that's left over after coal is burned and can contain high levels of arsenic and also mercury. According to the federal officials, ash near the spill is still 5 feet thick.
Officials today are warning residents to avoid contact with fish and water from the Dan River. Just as state regulators may force the company responsible, Duke Energy, to move its wastewater dumps farther from the river.
A loud and clear message to Duke Energy today. Protesters banged drums and pulled crime scene tape outside the company's shareholders meeting in uptown Charlotte earlier. They are upset in part about a coal ash spill that coated 70 miles of the Dan River with toxic sludge.
The people shouldn't have to pay no rate. No way. The people shouldn't.
It's not normal. This is not a normal thing for this river. How the environment responds to it, don't know. A lot of things can adapt to a lot of things, but toxins are hard to adapt to.
Here's little Eden, nobody even knows we're on the map. And all of a sudden we got the third largest coal ash spill in the United States, and it's on national news, on NBC and CBS. I mean, nobody even know we existed otherwise except for something negative. Now, how does that help your city?
Most of the people here are trying to make a living, trying to get a job, and they're really unconcerned about that coal ash spill because they have nothing to do with it. They don't have any control over it. And I've said from the very beginning that there's 3 groups of people really interested in this. The media's interested in it, the politicians, and the environmentalists. Outside of that, nobody gives a shit.
This is really a part-time job, but I probably put in 40 hours a week doing it. I'm here almost every day, and a lot of Saturdays and Sundays I'm doing a lot of stuff. I'm probably one of the hardest working people making $370 a month as a mayor you'll ever run into. There are 2 pipes that they're talking about. One was a 48-inch pipe, which was this particular pipe, and it was a stormwater pipe. What happened is all the pressure crushed that pipe. All that coal ash and water ran out of here, and there was like 27 million gallons of water, of toxic water, ran into the Dan River, which is awful. It really makes it hard for us as a small community to try to rebrand ourselves and come back again. Now we've got to come back again after we've already made a comeback, and this really did hurt us along the way.
I think when discussing the history of Eden, you have to take into account that Eden in 1967 was a consolidated town of 4 areas: Leakesville, Spray, Draper, and what was called the Meadows Sanitary District. When future Governor John Motley Moorhead bought into that establishment with Barnett, he eventually took it over and established a cotton mill using that water power off the canal. So that really was the birth of the cotton textile industry here. As each mill went up, you would get a little village around it with the superintendent and the line workers, and then the next mill would go up, and so forth and so on and so on. As more and more mills came, all of the area became far more prosperous than anyone could have ever dreamed. In fact, at one point, Spray was referred to as the Lowell of the South. And it looked like things would never go wrong, never go bad. Only bright prospects, great optimism. Trade started going overseas. The cotton industry were constantly looking for cheaper labor. So Eden eventually fell the same way as most textile towns do, and we, unlike some other larger cities like Greensboro, we didn't have the base of business, other corporations and businesses to absorb our unemployed. So when the mills fell, then the town now is falling.
This is my mother, and you can see, you don't need to look very far to tell she didn't have a lot of money. My mother was Primitive Baptist. My dad was a Primitive Baptist preacher. My grandfather and grandmother were, and they were being baptized in the river.
Is that the Dan River?
Yeah, of all things. And I sort of grew up by myself in the woods. I didn't know where to go. I didn't want to work in the mill all my life. I was in the military from 68 to 72, and I was in Vietnam in 69 and 70. I was in a tower, on tower watch, took my own picture. That was a selfie in 1969. I spent 30 years in education. I was an elementary principal, the old junior high school before they had a middle school, and a high school principal. I've dealt with children from all backgrounds, from black, white, rich, poor, and people have a hard time, and you just learn to try to do the best you can to try to make their life a little bit better. What was bad when we tried to rebrand our city and try to do the right things and make this place a destination, then the coal ash spill just absolutely ruined that. So we went through all of this time, spent all this money, and tried to rebrand ourselves. Then all of a sudden we're rebranded, and then the media hits us in one fell swoop.
The old Duke Energy steam station in Eden.
That massive coal ash spill in Eden.
In Eden, North Carolina.
A Duke Energy coal ash dump in Eden, North Carolina.
When it spilled from its plant in Eden.
Coal ash spilled from one of Duke Energy's power plants in Eden.
Do you think anybody cares about us rebranding our city or care about jobs or poverty or those type things this year? Their main concern is one thing. Look at that coal ash. Look what it's done. Look how it's ruined the environment. Look how it's doing, how the drinking water is no good in the city of Eden. It was an awful thing to happen to us as a city. So what we've done is we've tried to turn it around. People have heard of Eden now, but we have to change it over. And so we've gotten a PR firm out of Greensboro. And actually Duke Energy gave us a couple $100,000 to help us do something with this tarnished image that we have. We're trying to take a bad situation, turn it around, use it to our advantage. People have heard of Eden, but we have to rebrand it in such a way to say the rivers are safe, it's okay to be on. It was a horrible environmental thing that happened, but you have to move on with your community and try to find jobs for people. In early 2011, we said we got to come up with something and make it permanent, make it a place where everybody knows where it is, and it's a place where you can not only get education, but you can get some type of skill training. And we've gotten, I think over 800 people have gotten jobs since then, so that's a wonderful thing to be able to do something to find permanent jobs for people. You ever hear anybody ever talk about coal ash?
All the time.
Do you?
Yes, sir, all the time. Especially with what has happened in the last couple of months, you know, that I hear it all the time.
But their main concern is trying to find a job and put food on the table, isn't it?
That's the main concern.
I mean, they might talk about it, but they're not really that concerned about it when it comes to jobs and trying to find employment.
Because the biggest thing is I want to feed my family.
Yeah, it is. I know. That's sort of what we've said about the whole thing.
Okay.
My mother was like 15 years old when she started working in the mill. But she's typical of so many people that came out of the mountains and found jobs in the mill. They provided jobs and opportunities, and even though they're mill houses, if you put it in perspective, these were nice houses, a nice place to live, and they had paychecks coming in. So that's just part of the evolution of America and our economy. Right here's a house that I was born in. This one right here. According to my brother, it looks pretty much the same as it did 50 years ago. Same people, poverty, very poor. And if you take a look at the houses here, you can just see what's going on. Unskilled, a lot of uneducated people live in this area. On behalf of the City of Eden, all the retailers, we're awfully happy to have you. And what a transition we've made from Cochran Insurance. Has been here for how long?
30 years.
30 years, going from Cochran Insurance to the Jitterbug. I love that. What a great name.
Thank you.
On behalf of the city, and let's cut this ribbon, and best of wishes to you. You don't hold that right there because we have to cut it 2 times for everybody. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Well, I don't know how my store fits in yet, but I know that we lost 4 businesses last year, and it's been very, very hard. We do have an online store. That's where most of our revenue is coming in. And that's where I imagine that we'll make a lot of it unless something changes. I don't know, and I'm going to ask you this, because there were certain people that told us about the coal ash spill and said that it would take 20+ years for them to take all of the contaminants out of the water. And if they've given any kind of projected time period, do you guys have any information about that?
Duke Energy is working now to remove its dredging equipment from a park beside the river. A firm contracted by the energy company says it's removed more than 2,000 tons of coal ash from the river since May. More than 39,000 tons of ash spilled into the river in February.
Every day we have a major spill going on. It's just you can't see it like the Dan River spill. There are 14 sites with 32 or 33 lagoons and other dry storage, and they are constantly leaking these contaminants into our groundwater and through holes and leaks and defects in the dikes directly into our rivers and our drinking water system.
It was 2 days after the spill. We came down through here. We were the first boats on the river. The thing that struck me was they were busy worried about how to stop the leak, which was great, but at the same time I felt like they could have had dredges or at least suction in there pumping this stuff out, and we never saw that. We didn't see that till July. So by that time the coal ash is mixed in with the sediments and on downstream, and it's one of the first things I thought. It's like, well, the longer you wait, the easier it's going to be to say it's going to be hard to clean this up, which is pretty much exactly what happened. We're checking the stream bed for macroinvertebrates, and macroinvertebrates are things like this helgramite. And the problem that we're going to see is if the heavy metals accumulate in these things, those toxins, it may not affect this particular animal, but if a fish eats 10 of these, then obviously the toxins are going to biomagnify and right up the food web to birds and otters, and then maybe even to humans. What we started noticing was a preponderance of shells all up and down the riverbank. These guys live on the bottom and they're filter feeders. They can filter about 10 gallons of water a day. These guys can't swim away from the coal ash. So we know that, you know, the pile of coal ash that piled up on top of these guys probably killed quite a number of them. You're screwing up the balance of nature. I mean, we do it all the time anyway, but then when you have a catastrophic event like this that really does it, it's really hard for nature to bounce back after something like that. The best thing is to remove the source of the problem first and then let the river heal naturally. When we first got here, this pipe was still dripping. The scaffolding wasn't here. They built all this so they could seal this pipe up. But the coal ash was still dripping out of the pipe. At first we were just in triage mode. What do we do? You know, how do we fix this? How do we react to this? And then as you got to looking at it and coming down here every day and seeing the sediment build up and the coal ash and knowing what effects it may have, not knowing what effects it may have, it was devastating. I mean, it was a tragedy for us. We're river lovers. We're out here on the river all the time. We wrote a guide for this river. We encourage people to be on the river, out here in boats, paddling, enjoying it, fishing, swimming. And, you know, we all want cheap energy. I don't think, you know, Duke is bad guys. You know, they're providing us with a service. I flip on my lights at night, you know, I want power, I want heat, and I want it at a reasonable rate, but not at the cost of water quality or my environment.
Is he in his 40s? Well, he's one of the first ones I taught over there. There's some students that I know of that's just turned 50 that I taught in school. Duke has cleaned up as much as they can, quote, clean up. You know, I don't know. All the politicians and the lawyers will take care of all that stuff now. All the attorneys and environmental people and federal government, EPA, we're sort of left out of it. And there's not a whole lot we can do at this point. Small cities just don't have a whole lot to say in these types of things. Fracking is a 26-page bill that I read. I read every single sentence of it. Coal ash is 45 pages long. I read every sentence, and it's all a bunch of legalese. And what both of those things say is it pretty much circumvents anything that local authorities, in any ordinances you have, we have no authority. There's practically nothing we can do about it, because it all goes back to the state as to how the state deals with fracking and how the state deals with coal ash, and the local people have very little say-so in it. That's what it's in the bill. You can see how it's written. This whole city is based on the land of two rivers. I mean, that's in our seal. And it's really important that we make sure that we don't have any contaminated water. We have Miller Brewing here, and Miller uses 800 million gallons of water a year. That, to a large extent, is the lifeblood of our city and our budget. So the last thing we want is for somebody to come in and cause some type of environmental havoc, contaminate the streams, and Miller Brewing move out, and us lose 800 million gallons of water being used every year.
Put a little food in here before we get going. They start coming up when they see that food. We do a lot of different stuff all the time. I mean, we might be in the office designing a sign or working on a trail. I mean, our job varies every single day. Mm-hmm. Or we might be down, you know, pulling coal ash samples. So that was just kind of dumped in our lap, and it really chewed up a lot of our time. This is what we like to do. We like to teach kids about water quality and the environment, and then we're stuck with something like that, cleaning up somebody else's mess. It's a disaster. Depressing. These are all the brown trout eggs that Krista picked up, and what they are right now is they're called eye-up eggs. These are actually hatching. You can see some little babies hatching in there right now. And we're going to take some over to one of our local schools, Rich Acres. You should see them start hatching pretty soon. Some of them are already hatching, so you watch them over the next couple of days, and especially next week. You're going to see them all coming hatching out and then swimming around. They're going to be little babies with big old yolk sacs on them, and then they're going to get about this big, and then by April and May next year they're going to be about that big, about the size of your finger, and we call them fingerlings. Yeah, and then you know what we're going to do with them?
Yeah.
What?
Put them in the ocean.
The river. So you guys are going to get to see them from hatching all the way to when they get big, and you're going to take care of them and feed them and everything. You guys going to feed them for us? Yeah. Take care of them? Yeah. Good. And you can name them too. It's really changed the lives of a lot of kids that some other program hasn't affected them at all, and then all of a sudden this comes into their classroom. They get interested in taking care of the trout. They get interested in, you know, coming to school early and feeding the trout.
This area right here was called the Boulevard. You can see the one that had the column over there, that was a bank. This right here used to be the Grand Theater. At one time, this was a vibrant area. People used to go, I've been to the movies there before. It's just, you know, things just get outdated and people move on. If you don't have a retail to come here, obviously you have to have the retail for the people to come. So this is an area of town that's just about dead. We spent about $800,000 on building this greenway. And that was another thing that went along with the concept of a land of two rivers. We wanted a place to walk, a place to boat, a place to put canoes in, wanted a shelter here where people could cook out. Like I said, the Duke coal ash just about ruined us with changing this image. Although we still got this stuff and we're still pushing on, doing everything we can with it. All the mills that were here, they were here because of the river. What the textile industries were doing, the river ran blue, it ran pink, it ran purple, and all those different dyes that they used, they would dump them in the river. So I look at the coal ash spill in a historical perspective. There was a period of time when there was bad stuff going in the river, and when somebody finally figures out that's not a good thing, as time moves on, there are guidelines and there are stringent regulations that go in place to make sure that doesn't take place. Coal ash will be the same way.
We took responsibility immediately and have worked actively not only to repair the pipe early in the process, but to continue to work to improve throughout our operations. We have taken the steps necessary in order to improve throughout our system. We've used outside engineering experts. We've used outside scientists to help inform smart solutions. And we're working proactively to close all of our basins in North Carolina as rapidly and as safely as we can, because safe operations are our highest priority at Duke.
These kind of things take a long time. Over in Kingston, when they had the spill in 2008, they didn't even start publishing toxicology fish studies until 2010. So even though we're a year down the road and we're seeing, you know, a beautiful river behind us, and they're taking water samples and we're finding that the water is testing well and good, that's fantastic. We're happy about that. But we also know that there is still a lot of coal ash in the river. There's no denying that. There's over 30,000 tons still in the river that was not able to come out. You know, Google Dan River and you get coal ash. It's got a black eye. We need to figure out how to bring people back to the river. That's why we're not out here screaming doom and gloom. We're out here saying we've got a problem, we need to acknowledge it, and we need to move forward. Not only this is something that can happen to you, it happened to us, here's how we're coping with it, here's how we're going to deal with it down the road, and here's how we're going to rebound from it and rebuild and move on and get past it. But it can happen in your community too. It's like I tell everybody, we all live downstream from somebody else.
The city of Eden is a wonderful community to live in, and I've lived here and been around this area a long time, and it's terrific people to be around. I think it's a political hot potato, and when something serious like this coal ash spill happened, I think this was a catalyst for probably people paying more attention to it than what it was before.
Yes, something's happened to the river. Yes, things can happen to the river. Let's protect the river. Let's do as much as we can to protect the river, because we want to use it for economic engine. We want people to come in here and see our beautiful town, our beautiful community, and get on our river and bring their money from someplace else and leave it in our community, you know, because the rising tide lifts all boats.
Hundreds of people in Rockingham County are about to lose their jobs. After nearly 40 years, the Miller Coors Brewery in Eden is shutting its doors for good.
The domino effect will hurt countless other jobs in trucking, canning, other businesses connected, all to the Miller Coors operation. City leaders say they will lose over $1 million in taxes, roughly 3% of the city's budget.
Well, it was devastating for us. Actually, it caught us totally by surprise. We had no idea they were going to do it. And Miller's been such an important part of the city. It's been here for over 37 years. And to lose an industry like that, it's bad for the city. It's bad for us economically. Actually, Miller Coors hurt us a lot more than the coal ash spill. Nobody lost a job as a result of a coal ash spill. It's more of an environmental disaster. The emotions are not there with a place that closes and people lose their jobs. I wish they were, but they're not. It's actually not shut down now. It'll close in September 2016. And we appreciate them at least giving us a year to work with the people to try to find jobs. And a lot of these people on their own, obviously, they'll go out and start looking for stuff since they've got a year to try to find jobs to reestablish themselves again. After all the textile industries left, what we've deliberately tried to do is make sure that never happens again by being very diverse. So losing Miller hurts us, but it's nothing like it has been in the past. So, we're doing quite well at this point.